Hello, and welcome back to another episode. October is here. Halloween approaches. It is my favourite time of the year, and I'm very much in the festive mood. And today I have a question. Am I, in fact, a gremlin? You see, Gremlins are probably most well known for their 1984 movie, the year I was born. In that movie, a desperate dad buys a last-minute gift for his son. It's a pet called a mogwai, and it comes with a certain warning. You shouldn't feed it after midnight, lest gremlins ensue. And of course, the mogwai is fed after midnight, and of course, havoc is unleashed when these gremlins, who have a particular affinity for technology and gadgets and getting into places where they shouldn't quite be, are unleashed on the world, and the whole film goes on from there. But I can't help but wonder whether I have a particular affinity for gremlins, because I just can't resist sometimes just pushing buttons in particular and breaking things in my wake. One of the earliest examples, one of the first things I remember when it comes to button pushing was my dad's ZX Spectrum. I don't remember my dad playing with it. I have very few memories of my father. But I do remember this thing, the ZX Spectrum. I remember being fascinated by it. And this was before I could walk. And he'd spent the night setting up a game. You had to type in the code for the game in person. If you got a bit of the code wrong, you'd have to go back through and debug the code for the game. Maybe up to 24 hours before he even wanted to play the game. He was really into sort of Lord of the Rings games and adventures and RPGs, this kind of thing. So clearly it was an important setup that he'd been doing, and I crawled over to the ZX Spectrum, and I was always fascinated by it because it had these rubber keys, these beautiful buttons that just were so enticing, and they had this colour, sort of stripe of colour on the top of the keyboard. And I don't know what I did, but I did something. My dad left the room apparently for 3 minutes. Less than 3 minutes. He literally, because I was so small, he didn't want to leave me alone for long. So he just popped out of the room, and when he came back, the console was broken. It wasn't obviously physically damaged, but somehow I had pushed a combination of buttons that bricked his beloved ZX Spectrum. And apparently he found it quite hard, quite hard to consider how on earth his beautiful baby boy had done this in such a short amount of time. And I remember as I grew older, that story it sat with me. It sort of followed me a little bit, and not only was I curious as to what I had done, but also I found that actually I did in fact have this almost inescapable compulsion to push buttons wherever I found them. Sometimes these are physical buttons. Sometimes they are sort of metaphorical. Maybe if I know, for example, that my lovely wife is slightly annoyed about something, I can't help but push the button to get a slight reaction from her. I am, in that sense, slightly chaotic neutral, I think. This continued though. I remember when I went on early school trips or family outings, perhaps. Maybe we would go to see a big old house somewhere in the countryside, and there'd be a button on the wall, and I'd need to know what the button did. I would sort of boop, push it, and nothing apparently happened. I was like, okay, fair enough. That was a bit of a letdown. But then suddenly someone burst into the room and said, "Who pushed the button?" And I was like, what? And by then I was at the other side of the room, thankfully, so I was just as surprised as everyone else when someone burst into the room. I didn't, of course, own up to having pushed the button, but apparently I'd been pushing the button for the servants' quarters bells, which, of course, there are no servants left in the house, but it's annoying because it's now the office for the manager of the estate. And so I'd been ringing this bell in their ear while they'd been on a phone call. And that's relatively low level, relatively innocent stuff. But it continued on. I would find myself drawn to opening doors, perhaps, that were alarmed, because I had this great big button. You push this bar, and suddenly all hell would break loose in a shop. And and people would be, lining up outside because there was possibly a fire drill, or maybe even actual fire because the fire escape had been opened. And I do feel bad about that. I really do. I remember as I got older, I became less and less likely to open alarmed doors, but my compulsion continued. When I first met my amazing wife, we were driving somewhere in her car. At that point I couldn't drive, but she could, and her radio was playing, her CD player, and there was a button on the dashboard, and I was like, what does this button do? Can you tell me what this does? And she's like, I have no idea. I just it works. I press play, I tune the radio. That's all I need to that's all I need from this CD player. But I held on for as long as I could because I'd only just met her and I wanted to make a good impression. But I had to push the button, so bonk, and then the whole thing fell out of the dashboard. Essentially, it was a security measure. That it was to make sure that the front of the radio system could come off, and if she wanted to, she could carry it in her bag or something, so it was less likely to be stolen in a car park or something. So it was low level button pushing, but nonetheless, I couldn't resist. Later on, when she was helping me move to York, as I mentioned last week, I think. There was a van that we hired that had orange lights on top, decommissioned orange lights. They weren't going to work, but I didn't know that. I was desperate, and again at that point I couldn't drive, so I spent the entire trip trying to find the button that would turn on the lights because I needed to find it. Where's the button? Where is it? And there's been loads of things like that all the way through my life. I just can't resist. I cannot resist pushing buttons. But the worst example is from early in high school. And this is something that I may have talked about in a live stream before. I don't think I've mentioned in a video though. And I didn't actually mention to anyone until I met my amazing wife, until we were married, I guess, actually. I just happened to mention this one day. So this is a bit of a confession, but it's also quite amusing. I think I'm safe now. In high school, year 7 or year 8, there was a field trip to a place called Electric Mountain in Snowdonia. And as a high school from Prestatyn, it was quite a cool little adventure up into the mountains, into the national park, to see this place where they have two reservoirs. There's a reservoir at the top of a mountain, a reservoir at the bottom. And they pass the water through a series of turbines in caves that have been carved out of the mountain. It's like something out of a James Bond movie. It's a really impressive facility. And they just let the water tumble through the turbines. It provides a huge boost to the national grid when it's required, and then the water can be pumped back up to the upper reservoir in the downtime, as it were. So the most famous example of the use of Electric Mountain is during the FA Cup, the football FA Cup half-time during the final, when people go on to put the kettle on. They go to the kitchen, turn on the kettle to make a cup of tea, and suddenly there's a massive draw on the national grid. So they loose the lake, loose the reservoir. It all comes tumbling through, and a massive amount of energy is pumped into the grid, and people get their cups of tea on FA Cup final day. So we were going there to see and to learn not only about this amazing facility, but also about electricity and how it's generated. And it was fantastic. I was in awe of this place. Little golf cart type things driving around in these cavernous spaces, and we ended up on this platform, I think above some turbines. Again, it was a while ago now. My memory's slightly fuzzy, but it was very loud. And the person giving us the tour was shouting to shout, this is the turbine, this is what happens when with the blah 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 blah. And all the while he was talking, my eyes were just drawn to this delicious looking big red button. It was like a giant gummy sweet just sitting there, begging to be pushed, and I wanted to know what it did. There was a sign on it. The label read, emergency, do not press, kind of thing. But couldn't resist. I couldn't resist, and so I pushed it. It took both hands. I sort of, ka-dunk. Then, alarms were going off. The whole machine or turbine or whatever it was we were above shut down. We had to evacuate immediately. The whole facility went into total panic. People were running around screaming, what happened? What happened? What did... Oh my goodness. Oh dear. And we were shepherded back onto our bus, and I think then we ended up having a quick trip to Harlech Castle instead, and some ice cream, and exploring that medieval castle as a bit of a, trying to rescue the day, having ended the day prematurely at Electric Mountain. And it was maybe a week, possibly 2 weeks later, when when our year group was brought into the assembly hall, and our head teacher, Mr. Keep, a very scary man, stood up in front of us all and said, I have a letter to read to you from the administrators at Electric Mountain. We don't know who did this, but we know it was someone in this room. And so I just want to read to you what they have told me. And he went on to detail how the button that was pushed had been an emergency halt, emergency cease button. It was a button essentially there to provide safety if someone fell into machinery or was otherwise in danger. It was not a button that they used regularly, if ever at all, because it was emergency abort stop shutdown system button. It had taken them a few days to get the system back up again, and to restart things that had seized up because of the emergency abort. And this had cost, I don't know, untold tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds in estimated electricity output or something. It was one of those things where stats were thrown at us, because I was just melting, and I was like, oh no, just dying inside, because no one knew. None of my friends knew. No one knew I had done this. He basically said, and we are not allowed back. The school was no longer going to be allowed to visit the site because it had been so catastrophically stymied by some random person pushing a button that they shouldn't. And that I felt really bad for that. I felt really, really bad. Obviously not bad enough to stop pushing buttons. As I say, I went on to push buttons in Mrs. Soup's car, and in the van and all this kind of thing. But I think I learned my lesson when it came to big industrial buttons. I'm much better now at not pushing them. But I still have the instinct. I still have the compulsion to push buttons, and I think this might be why I'm drawn to fidget toys. I have a little tray of fidgety things that I can fiddle with now, just to distract myself if I ever get the urge to push things. But boy, oh boy, oh boy, am I good at finding that one thing, that one little weakness in a system, and pushing the button. Am I in fact a gremlin? I don't know. I mean, you tell me. Comment below. Am I a gremlin? Am I chaotic neutral? Am I someone who needs to keep their fingers to themselves? Or am I in fact charmingly curious? Is that what it is? Am I just someone who just needs to know? It's fun, it's innocent. I'm not sure it is completely innocent. I sort of drift, I think, between different opinions of myself on this one. But hopefully this has been interesting and or fun for you to hear about. And hopefully we're going to have a lovely October in the build-up to Halloween. Thank you for watching, guys. Until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.